I have voted Republican my entire life. I have voted Republican since Ronald Reagan, but this is not the party that I identified with. These are not traditional conservative values that we're seeing in the MAGA Donald Trump movement. And therefore, this will be actually the first time that I am supporting a Democrat.
I am delighted to welcome Olivia Troye, the National Security Advisor under Donald Trump. Olivia worked on national security and homeland security issues at the National Counterterrorism Centre before becoming the Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor to Vice President Mike Pence. But in 2020, Olivia, along with over 130 other former Republican national security officials, signed a statement asserting that President Trump was unfit to serve another term. Olivia is now endorsing Republicans for Harris. Olivia, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks so much for being here. Now, tell us about your endorsement of Republicans for Harris. What does that mean?
Well, it's obviously these are extraordinary times that we're seeing in the United States. And here you have a coalition of lifelong Republicans like myself. I'm someone who served in the Bush administration days and who started my career in Republican politics. And I felt very strongly that once again, what we're facing this November is a critical moment for our country in terms of how we move forward and what the future looks like for us. And so I decided that I would put my endorsement behind Kamala Harris and support her as a candidate. And the entire effort is basically focused on creating a permission structure and reaching other conservatives, Republican voters, and independent voters to join us in this broader coalition to supporting this Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
What are your fears in the security community about a second potential Trump presidency?
As someone who worked in the Trump White House, and I served all 4 years during his administration in the national security space, I saw firsthand the danger that he posed, the instability that he brought into the White House and into our foreign policy, into our diplomacy, and also the way he would undermine our intelligence community, our national security community, and our military. Whenever it was something was brought to him, brought to his attention, something that national security related about foreign adversaries and concerns that we had of things going on, a lot of the time, if it did not fit with the current narrative that he wanted, he would either undermine the community publicly, undermine that military officer publicly, or he would fire them. And I think that is a dangerous precedent for our country. And I am uh, looking at what's at stake here for our election and looking at our alliances globally and what that means in terms of what a future with Donald Trump back in the Oval Office would look like.
And how popular is this campaign of Republicans for Harris?
I was actually, I had the privilege of moderating a Republicans for Harris Zoom rally, and I was actually surprised at the amount of support that we got during that rally. Over 73,000 people attended that Zoom, and that was just the kickoff in the beginning. I have been hearing from a lot of Republicans across the country who identify like I do. I mean, I've had notes from people saying, I have voted Republican my entire life. I have voted Republican since Ronald Reagan, but this is not the party that I identified with. These are not traditional conservative values that we're seeing in the MAGA Donald Trump movement. And therefore, this will be actually the first time that I am supporting a Democrat. And so I think that there is sort of a different change in the atmosphere that we're seeing. I think for many of us who are at the leadership level here, who are trying to sort of do this outreach for the Kamala Harris campaign, truly honestly believe that in order to find a better path for the Republican Party right now in this moment, we have to defeat what Donald Trump represents, him as a candidate and the movement that he is cultivating behind him in order to hopefully get the Republican Party on a better path.
Interesting. Now, your candidate, Vice President Kamala Harris, sat down last night with CNN's Diana Bash for her first major TV interview since becoming the presidential nominee of the Democratic Party. The interview was conducted in Savannah on the sidelines of a bus tour through the key Sunbelt states of Georgia and alongside her running mate, Tim Walz. Olivia, what was your main takeaway from last night's interview?
I think she showed leadership in that interview. And I think you have someone who is just being very honest about how they have evolved in their policy positions over time. I think I do give her tremendous credit for being willing to say that publicly as a politician, right? Because a lot of the time you see people kind of try to sidestep that. But she is just saying, look, I have been sort of navigating these policies. I've been watching sort of what has happened here. I have evolved in time with my thinking. And I think that's important because I think people do evolve in their thinking over time when they're faced with challenges. I also, during that interview, I think she was asked whether she would consider appointing a Republican to her cabinet. And she said that, yes, that she would not have a problem with that, right? That she would consider doing that because she thinks that it's important to have varying perspectives at the table, which I think do actually make her a stronger leader when you do have that, when you have differing points of view, in contrast to what Donald Trump would do, right? I mean, he wants people to be yes men and people that align just as loyalists. He does not want anyone to stand against his views. And I think for a leader to exhibit strong leadership and for the greater good of our country, it's important to have varying perspectives at the table to figure out what is the best option and have all of these voices in the room sort of laying things out.
Mm. I mean, some people have said that it was a bit of a softball of an interview and that she still hasn't really answered her critics or Republicans on how she'll handle contentious issues, particularly the economy and immigration. How much of a problem is that? And do you think she's got time to win over the doubters on things like inflation and migration and Gaza?
I think there's still time. Obviously, this election is quickly approaching, but I think she is out there in the swing states talking to voters directly, which I think is the most important thing for here to be doing. They need to get to know her as a candidate. They need to see who she really is, what she represents. I think, she is talking about immigration. She's talking about the border, and she's also reminding people that there was a bipartisan border bill that Donald Trump, because he did not want to hand Biden a win, he chose to derail that bill in Congress. And so I think that is an important aspect here of what is happening. I do think that she does need to be talking more about the economy. She does need to be explaining what has happened here in a country that's recovering from COVID and how the economy has bounced back. And there will be time before there's a trickle down effect for the American population to really like see that and feel that. But I think for overall, I mean, you can say that they were softball questions. I think Dana Bash was actually asking a lot of the questions that Republicans sort of tried to attack Kamala Harris on, and I think she answered. And I said, I think we'll see her on the campaign trail. We'll see her continue to respond to those questions. And again, I think the critical piece of this is for her to actually reach out to the voters, get out there on the ground and engage them and talk to them one on one, which is what she has been doing.
Mm. Now, Kamala is easily the most strident presidential candidate we've seen on the subject of reproductive rights and obviously fiercely pro choice. But Donald Trump this week introduced a new campaign platform aimed at helping Americans with the crippling cost of IVF. At a town hall moderated by his supporter, Tulsi Gabbard, Trump said that he and his team had been exploring ways to help those wanting IVF. I think we're going to hear
Yeah,
a clip. Oh, we're
there,
not going to hear a clip. I'm sorry, Olivia. That was my
okay.
mistake. This could be a really popular policy amongst those trying to have kids. How concerned are you that this might really win him a lot of support?
Well, Donald Trump says a lot of things to different people. He's sort of like the classic used car salesman that will say things in the moment. I think what concerns me is the type of people that he surrounds himself with. And there's some pretty extreme policies that his inner circle have proposed, especially with the Project 2025 agenda. I've been in those meetings where they have talked about looking at FDA regulations on birth control, where they have actually talked about considering what changes they would do. So I take that with a grain of salt, and I would love to see actual like proposals of what he plans to do. But again, it's really hard to take Donald Trump at his word when he says things, knowing the type of people and extremism that he has surrounded himself with that actually stand very contradictory to what he's actually saying. I think it goes to show, though, that he is very concerned about the women's vote. He's very concerned about women standing up for their reproductive rights, and especially in the aftermath of Roe versus Wade. And I'm telling you this as someone who is a conservative voter, who is a conservative woman, right? And I'm talking to other conservative women, and they're watching the extremism that's happening in the United States in places like Texas, and what's happening here in some of these Republican agendas. And so those are the things that I think people are paying close attention to especially when you have Donald Trump who flip flops and wavers and says things publicly one day and then changes his mind the next.
Thank you so much, Olivia, for your time and your insights tonight. That's Olivia Troye, who's a national security advisor under Donald Trump.